Okay, welcome to day 13. And this one is kind of a funny one because I wrote the word scale. Now, when I say scale, what do you think of? Do you literally think of like the old-fashioned scales that have quantities in it? Because you could talk about balance, you could have different items in those, or we could talk about scale as in size. So we have really small going to really large, and then how are you going to draw going from one to the other? So this is the fun thing about this doodle challenge, is that there are so many different words out there that have so many different meanings that you can just go with that. So if I think about scale on that part, maybe I will draw or doodle different objects in there, like if it's gold or if it's sand or if it's pebbles or whatever objects that's going to be in there. And so that is a fun way to think about that. I also think about having these strings and how am I going to draw those strings? How am I going to connect that? You know, how am I going to come to the peak of that? And then am I going to offer some shading in here? How do I offer this depth in here? So I'm creating this look. And then all of this is just doodling, right? It's all just creating the shading. And then, you know, how am I going to connect it to something else? And so that's a fun thing to think about. The other thing about scale and size is that how am I going to create different shapes in different sizes, okay? And then what kind of detail, am I going to do the opposite? Or I'm going to fill this in different ways. So just being really mindful about scale. I mean, the other thing you can do is you could doodle. When you think of scale, you think about a little mouse compared to an elephant. And, you know, how do you doodle a mouse? And with a little tail and the body and all of that. And can you draw these things without lifting your pen? And, oh my goodness, I don't even know what I'm drawing here. Anyway, so just think about that. I really want to encourage you to do that. Now, with scale, the other thing that I can think about is if you're going to create one doodle design, let's say we have this design in here. So I've drawn all of these different, so the squares or the rectangles, pardon me, are all the same size, okay? So let's create a different challenge for your brain, because sometimes you're like, it's a blank piece of paper. What do I do? It feels really intimidating. So then you say, all right, I have all of these rectangles. They're all approximately the same size. Now remember, we don't need to get our rulers out and get too fanatical about it. But think about, let's say you take a subject like a sucker. I have no idea why that popped in my head. So you take a sucker and you just draw it. Now, if you had different scales of the sucker, this could be the stem, and this could be the size of your sucker. And then are you going to create different sizes on it? So maybe I'll have this little ridge on here. And then maybe this will just be the stem. And, oops, no, put your pen up. And then this would be this part here. So you're drawing the same item, but you're creating it on a different scale. So interesting, right? So I've given you lots of different things to think about, and I am super excited to see what you come up with on all of these different ideas. Cannot wait to see you on day 14.